I will let you go live now, okay?
Go on.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, I'm Sam, sales manager here at Interface. We're Bitrix24 Gold Partners, and today we're going through our Total Telephony webinar. So thank you very much for joining today. Okay, so as I say, I'm Sam Connor, sales manager here at Interface, and we're based in the UK, the US, and Hong Kong, and we offer a full range of services to help you with Bitrix24. So first of all, starting off with pre-sales support, so we can assist you and help you with your Bitrix24 requirements. So essentially, we can help you to evaluate Bitrix, see if it is a good fit for what you're trying to achieve. And if it is, we can then help with the full setup of the Bitrix24 system so we can get it designed and built exactly how you need it to work. If you are interested in what we call a self-hosted edition of Bitrix, okay, so that is essentially a private cloud instance of Bitrix24. We can provide our hosting service for you, or if you are looking to host this yourself, we can provide you with the required server requirements. And then once your Bitrix24 system is set up, we can then provide training and ongoing support to really help you get the most possible value out of the Bitrix24 system. Okay. And if you're coming to today's webinar to actually get some more information about Bitrix, let's just go through what Bitrix24 actually is. So Bitrix24 is essentially a collaboration suite of well in excess of 40 different tools that you can use to help you to manage your business. And there are over 12 million customers now around the world that use the Bitrix24 system. And as I mentioned there are two different editions of Bitrix. So we have the Bitrix24 Cloud and we have the Bitrix24 self-hosted solution. Okay, now in terms of pricing, so prices start from approximately $49 per month for a cloud-based edition. Or if you're interested in the self-hosted edition of Bitrix24, then prices start from $3,590. That's for the Business 50 edition. Okay, now with that self-hosted system, what you do need to remember is in year 2 and ongoing annually, you will pay a 25% renewal fee on that original license cost to continue to use and access the Bitrix24 system. Okay, so let's now focus more and deep dive into the telephony requirements and functionality within Bitrix24. So let's understand first of all why you should use Bitrix24 for your telephony requirements. So first of all, Bitrix has a built-in phone system, so it's very simple to actually start using the telephony features within Bitrix24. Okay, we can integrate it also with existing PBXs, so if you need to keep your existing number, it is possible to essentially use that number within Bitrix24, and we'll take a look at the different options for integration. And a really valuable aspect to telephony within Bitrix is the CRM integration. Okay, so we can manage all of the recordings directly inside the CRM system. If somebody calls in, we can see that person's details pop up, so I can see who is actually calling in before I even answer the phone call. And we can make outbound calls directly through the system as well. Now, there are also reporting functionalities as well, so we can analyze the calls within our Bitrix24 system. And another benefit, it is the low setup cost. So we'll take a look now in a second at how we can rent a Bitrix24 number. And with this, we can then essentially rent a number from around $4 to $6 per month. Okay, so it's very simple to manage that number, and it's a low cost to set up. And that brings us on to look at the two different options for telephony inside Bitrix24. So first of all, it is Bitrix24 Telephony. So essentially, with Bitrix Telephony, this is where you're renting a number directly through Bitrix24 and their provider called Vox Implant. So you would select the country you're renting from, and then you would rent that number. And as I say, that's going to cost around $4 to $6 per month to rent that number. The second option is an integration. So if you need to keep your existing number, then we'd have a few different options for how you can continue to use your number and manage that through the Bitrix24 system. So we'll take a look at both options today. So first of all, let's take a look at Bitrix Telephony. So we're going to take a look first of all at how we can rent a number inside Bitrix24. We'll then see how we can configure that virtual phone system. So essentially you have a call center feature inside Bitrix24. We'll see how we can set up an IVR menu. We'll manage our inbound routing and record the calls inside the CRM system. And then we'll see how that looks inside the CRM. So we'll go into a customer's record and see how that integration looks with the call recordings inside the CRM. And then we'll take a look at the soft phone application as well. Okay, so let's go to our Bitrix24 system. So if you're looking to find where the telephony module is, then you can see this here inside the feed. And just below the feed, we then have our telephony module. Okay, so we can go into here, and this then opens up our telephony module. So let's have a look at option 1 first of all. So this is where we're going to rent a Bitrix24 number. Okay, so this is essentially what we call Bitrix24 Telephony. So inside the system here, you can see where we have the blue button here, which is where we can rent a Bitrix24 number. So let's go into this page. This then opens up our country locator. So I can select what country I want to rent a number from. And then I can choose the type of number. Okay, so let's say if I want it to be toll-free, for example. And then from here, I can select the type of number that I would like to rent. Okay, so there's different options there, so that we have the type of number. If it's a toll-free, I can then choose the category as well for that number. So if I wanted to really configure down on a toll-free number, I can select the category where I want to rent, like so I can choose the prefix. But let's say if I want to select a number inside the UK, then inside here I can select the type of number again, so whether it's local, could be a mobile number, or again it could be toll-free, for example. And then if I'm selecting a local number, I can then select the region that I want to rent that number from. So you can really go quite granular when it comes to the renting of a number through Bitrix24. Now, one thing to actually bear in mind with this is with some countries, you do just need to be understanding that there may be geographical location requirements. So say if I wanted to rent a number in Germany, for example, first of all, there would be an additional connection cost. And then also, as you can see here, there is this requirement where I need to submit a valid postal address for renting a number inside this country. So that's something to bear in mind. You can't just simply rent a number in every single country. Okay, for some countries you do need to add that additional authorization level for the renting of the number. So in here you would upload your verification document. Okay, and that's really as simple as it is for Bitrix24 Telephony. The next step would be to then top up your balance. So okay, so you'd add a balance for your number, so when then you make outbound calls, it will then take money from your balance. And in terms of those outbound calls, so you are charged per minute based on the country you are calling to when you are renting a Bitrix24 number. Inbound calls, they're included. They are free of charge. They're included with the renting of the Bitrix number. So you will just pay an additional fee for every outbound call that you manage through the system. But obviously, if you're going to use a toll-free number, then obviously inbound calls, they would be chargeable to yourself as you're using a toll-free number. Okay, so that's how we can rent a Bitrix24 number first of all. Then the next step is to actually configure that number so we can manage the virtual phone system for that number. So you can see here, these are my two numbers. So I can see the numbers that we are renting. So you can see we're paying here for those two numbers, we're paying $6 per month for the renting of those numbers. So it is a low setup cost. Now what I can do with those numbers, and there's no limit, by the way, to the number of numbers that you could rent through here. So this page could be full of all of the different numbers that I'm renting. you can then set up the virtual phone system for each number. So that's really useful. Let's say if you have 2 or 3 numbers, you can essentially configure the call routing, the IVR menu, the call recording, the welcome messages for each individual number. Okay, so let's open up. Here is the number that we've rented, and we've got the different settings here for how we can manage that number through the system. So first of all, we have the inbound call routing setting. So inside here, first of all, a really useful feature is the voice menu. So essentially we can set up an IVR menu. Now, if you don't know what an IVR is, essentially this is when a customer calls into the system, we can set up a voice menu. So we can put them through several different selections that would then route the call to the most relevant department inside the system. So let's say it could be press 1 for sales, press 2 for support, for example. So let's go into our IVR here and set up a menu. So first of all, we can see we have different levels here. So let's say if I want to press 1, then I'll be selected and routed to the sales department, for example. But let's say if we press option 2, then this is going to send us to the technical support team. Okay, so you can see here setting up an IVR menu is really valuable because it allows you to then route the caller to the most relevant department. So rather than going through to, say, a receptionist and then having to try and transfer that call through, we can get the person to the correct team easily through an IVR menu. So let's say here we've got 1 for sales, 2 for technical support. So what we need to do inside here now is we need to relay this information to the customer. So as we have a text to speak. So essentially we can type out the message that would get relayed to the customer as they are managing the phone call. Okay, so let's say hello, press 1 for sales, press 2 for support. Okay, so that will get relayed to the customer, and we can choose here the language for that message, the speed, and also the volume. Or if you wanted to record your own message, you could simply upload that as an audio file onto the system. So that's a really useful feature. And as you can see, if I come out of here, we have our different queue groups. Okay, so inside here we saw how we said press 1 for sales, press 2 for support. We can set up those different groups here. So let's say if I go into our sales group, I can see all the people we've got in their sales team. So if I needed to maybe add an additional person to there, I can add them into that group. And then we can then also set this up as well for our support group as well. So that's how we can then add people to the relevant groups inside this system. So that's a really useful feature available. There's no additional cost for that IVR menu. The only fee element there is depending on what license you have, it will then determine how many levels you can have on your IVR structure. Okay, so that's something to bear in mind. If you want, I think, more than 2 levels, you need to have at least a professional cloud edition. Okay, and then go through some of the settings. So we have the CRM integration. So let's say if the number is not registered inside the CRM system, we could then automatically create a new lead, for example, inside the CRM system. So that's a really useful piece of functionality that you could enable as well. We then have the recording feature. So that's, I would say, really valuable to turn this feature on. So you have this tick button here. So if you want to record calls directly through Bitrix, we can turn that functionality on. And we could also, quite useful as well, you might want to play a warning message. So on inbound calls, the customer, they get a warning just to let them know that the call will be recorded inside the system. Okay, we can then set up working hours so that you may have specific hours where phone calls are essentially manned. So when we have teams available to actually answer those phone calls. So inside here you can set up your time zone and then select the working hours that are available. Now anyone who calls outside those hours, we can then decide how that gets processed. So whether that gets forwarded to a specified number, maybe an out of hours number to someone who is available, or we might say, we might enable the voicemail, for example, and play a pre-recorded message. So there's different options available there. The next feature is we can add additional prefixes. So you might want to enable employees can select a specific number for outbound calls. So you might want to have that. Maybe if they're calling a certain region, maybe if it's say America, you might want a specific outbound number to be used. And then we could also have hold music, so you can set up when a customer's on hold, what exactly that music is used, or a greeting message, for example. So essentially, within the Bitrix system, that whole virtual phone system can be set up for every single number that you rent through Bitrix24. So, for $46 per month, we mentioned at the start it's a low setup cost, and then you have access to all of that functionality through the Bitrix24 system. So that's really useful for a lot of businesses who can then start to use some of these benefits of telephony really quickly through the Bitrix24 system. Okay, so moving on, obviously what we've seen there's a lot of functionality and settings that you're able to set up here. So it's really important that we set up permissions correctly. And within the telephony module, we do have access to set up permissions. So as an administrator, you don't need to be concerned. We have the ability here. So what we can do is for each role here, you can create different roles inside the system. And then based on those roles, there are then different essentially permission controls that we can set up. So for example, who's able to configure telephony settings? We might give full access, okay, for the manager role. But for other roles inside the system, we might deny all access, for example. And we might deny access, which we'll have a look at shortly, to the call statistics as well, for example. So with all of the features within the telephony module, what we can do is we can set up these different permissions to really control who's able to customize those settings and then who is able to see information as well through the telephony module. So that's really important to bear in mind as you're starting to use the telephony features, that we can configure permissions inside the system there. Okay, so now we have set up our virtual phone system, and you've seen how we can set up an integration with the CRM. So we have turned that CRM integration on. So what this essentially means is when inbound calls come into the system, Bitrix is going to check the CRM system. Okay, so if we go into the CRM, Bitrix is going to check here this contact database. And inside here, we're going to be looking to see if the person who is calling in, is their number already registered inside the CRM system. And if it is, then Bitrix is going to pull that customer's record into the opening of the telephony screen so you can see who is calling into the system. So let's just take a look at that in more detail. So we can see Sam Moon, who is a client within our CRM, is calling into our Bitrix system, calling that rented number. So I can see that information has come straight through. So I instantly know who is calling into the system. And as we mentioned earlier on, you can do call routing. So actually that call might be routed to myself as I'm the person responsible for that person in the CRM system. Or as I say, we could set up like an IVR menu as an example. So you can see there how that integration works. That's so valuable to be able to see the details of that person's record directly on the profile there. So I know who is calling in. And if we go into that customer's record inside Bitrix, let's just go back into our contact database. Then what we can do is if we click into the customer's profile, then what we can do is we can see all of those call recordings directly inside the system here. So I can play those calls back and I can listen to all of that history.
It's just me. I'm testing something.
Okay, so that's really valuable for sales staff. Okay, so if you're wanting to maybe remember what the latest conversation was with a customer that you're about to speak with, you could play those calls back really easily through the system. You've got all of the history of that call on the platform there. And I can click to call directly through the system. So I can make that outbound call directly through our contacts record in the CRM system. So the CRM integration piece within Bitrix24 is a hugely valuable feature within Bitrix24. It enables you to have all of that history saved in the system and to then make calls directly through the platform here. It simplifies all of that communication that takes place with your clients through the Bitrix24 system. Okay, so that is a look at some of the functionality within the CRM record. Now, it could be there are different ways that you might want to use telephony inside the CRM system. So I've shown you there in an individual contacts record, but we also have a lot of businesses who use the Bitrix CRM as their lead generation tool. So actually what we could also do is we could create a call list that we then assign to an employee inside the system. So let's say here, for example, we've just imported a bunch of leads inside the CRM system. What I could then do is I could create a list. So let's say in here I want to set up a call list for all of the leads either at the first call or second call stage. So we're still at quite an early stage of the sales process with these leads. So I want to create a list that one of our team can then make an outbound call to the customer. So I can then select all of those specific leads. Maybe if I want to take out one or two, I could then turn on or turn off that list. And then inside the action here, what I can then do, one of our actions is creating a call list. Okay, so that I could then apply this. And then inside here, I can then assign this to the relevant person. So let's say if I'm going to assign this to Mark, I can see Mark's calendar and availability. So let's add this in for tomorrow. Okay, so I can give this a title. Okay, and then I can give this a description as well. Okay, so that's now going to be actioned, and that is going to be a call list that is going to be in Mark's activities. So that will now be a list that he has got to call through. Or rather than a call list, what I could also do is I could just simply select the relevant leads in here, and I could start dialing directly through the system as well. So I can go through there, move on to my next call. If it's a disposition, I could then move on and through that list. So you can click the call directly through the system here. So essentially this can be a really powerful way to contact a huge number of leads in a very efficient manner with a system that is a very low setup cost. Okay, so that's a really valuable way to manage your calls through the CRM system. Then one other way, so we've seen how we can manually outbound call, we've seen how we can create a call list. Another way we can manage calls is through the automation center inside the CRM system. So we won't go through the CRM in too much detail in today's webinar because we do have a webinar that is specifically designed on the CRM system. So we cover the CRM in a huge amount of detail. But essentially within automations on leads and on deals, what we can do is at every stage of the sales process, so whether you're at that stage for immediately or maybe in a certain amount of time, we could set up an automation that takes place. So let's say, for example, we might want to set up a robocall. Okay, so I can come into here, and what we could do is we could set up a robocall directly through the system. Or it could be, for example, you might want to set up an outbound call trigger through the platform. So as we go through the automation center here, we could set up automations that then communicate, that could automatically send out a call to the customer, and you can type out the message that gets relayed to the client directly through the CRM system. And it's very similar functionality in terms of the marketing module here. So if we click on in the marketing module and go to the voice broadcasting feature, then inside here, you can type out the message that gets relayed to the client. So this can be dynamically populated. So let's say if I want to add the lead's name, so it's going to personalize this voice call with their name. Okay, so inside here, I've added my message, and it's going to be dynamically populated with the lead's name on that call. And then again, just like with the IVR menu that we set up earlier on, We can then decide what language that message gets relayed to the customer, what the speed is, and what the volume is. And so essentially what this will do here is we can then select our audience for this call. So this essentially will pull all of the data from the CRM system. So again, I might say I want to send this to all of the leads who are either new leads at the first call stage or at the second call stage. I could select those. So a very targeted list. And again, we could actually run this in as an automation through the CRM. So at a certain stage of the sales process, this could then automatically go out to the lead once they're at a certain point of the sales process. And so that would then send a phone call to that user. When they answer that call, this message would then get relayed to the customer as a voice broadcast. So it's a really useful way to engage with your potential customers as you're going through the sales journey with them. Okay, so that is a look there at how we can set up our Bitrix24 Telephony voice broadcasting system, essentially. So it's a virtual phone system that integrates with the CRM. And we've seen there it's a really simple and low setup cost. We can then help to configure the telephony settings with you. So that's where we can come in as a partner to help you get that virtual phone system set up accurately. It's really important you get it set up accurately. Otherwise, phone calls might be missed, which is going to be really, really valuable information for your business to use. Okay. Then the second options we have are integrations. Okay. Now, this is really essentially the other way to manage telephony inside Bitrix24. So the first way we've seen there is using our Bitrix24 rented number option. Okay, so that would be a brand new number inside the system. So the other aspects are integrations, and one of the reasons why you might do an integration is if you already have a phone number that the business is associated with. You've got a clientele that are using that number day in and day out, and you can't afford to change that number essentially. Or it could be maybe if you have negotiated a good call package with your phone provider and you want to continue with that billing arrangement. Again, that's another reason why you would continue to use your number. So let's take a look here at the different options that are available for integrating your existing phone number inside the system. And let's start off with the Bitrix24 SIP connector. Okay, so let's go back into our telephony module. Okay, so we've seen the option 1, which was renting a number, but option 2 can include using a PBX. So if you have an office or a cloud PBX, or if you can provide SIP trunks, then essentially you can keep your phone number and then get access to all Bitrix24 telephony and CRM features by renting a SIP connector to feed your phone numbers into the Bitrix system. So with both of these options, so obviously this would depend on what your PBX is, if it's an office or if it's a cloud PBX. But if we click on the button there, if we're wanting to input our credentials to use either the cloud or office PBX connector, I can click on the connection there. This will then open up a form that we have to complete. So you can see here the credentials that need to be completed. Once you've done this, you can then spend 60 minutes to test out that configuration with outbound calls. So you can, once you've added the information, you have 60 minutes to test outbound calls and make sure that the connection is working correctly for you. Once you have completed that testing, and if you want to proceed with the SIP connector, then you can purchase the SIP connector here. And it's a very similar process with the Office PBX. Really, the only difference here is the credentials that you add into the connection form. Okay, and once that's been done, if you then PBX, okay. A second option as an integration are using one of the applications that are available inside the marketplace. Okay, so within the Bitrix24 marketplace, these are applications that are available essentially for you. Now there are different apps inside here with phone providers that you can use. So let's say, for example, here quite a popular one is RingCentral Telephony. Okay, so if you've got a RingCentral plan, you could install the RingCentral Telephony application here, and then you're able to use the telephony functionality within Bitrix24. one thing just to point out is you do need to have a commercial Bitrix24 license, and you also need to have at least a Ring Central application, which is of a premium or enterprise package. Okay, so there are, I would say, not limitations, but specific thresholds that you have to meet to be able to use some of these applications. Okay, so if you do have a commercial Bitrix24 plan and the correct Ring Central plan, you can install that application. It's a free of charge application, as you can see here at the top, and then you can integrate your Ring Central numbers with Bitrix24. So this is the second option here. Have a look in the marketplace to see if your app is available inside the marketplace. And then the third option, essentially, if you're not able to rent a number, and if those integration options don't work in terms of the SIP connector or using an application within the marketplace, then what we can look to do is actually use the API. Okay, so we could use the Bitrix24 API to develop an integration with your system. Okay, but as a word of warning, that could cost anywhere in the region of, say, up to $20,000 for that development work. So essentially, if you're unsure what's the best option, we can talk through those options with you that we have. So there are quite a few different options there if you are wanting to integrate your existing phone number into Bitrix24. Okay, so that's a look at the integration pieces. And if you have any questions now, there was a question earlier on around how many numbers can we rent, and essentially there's no limit to the number of numbers that you rent through Bitrix24. So you could rent as many as you like, but again, because you can set up that virtual phone system, really there's not too much need to rent multiple numbers. You could just continue with that one number and then set up your IVR menu with your queue groups, etc., to manage the routing of calls through the system. And that then brings us on to costs. So we've mentioned already around Bitrix Telephony. So it's going to cost you around $4 to $6 per month to rent a Bitrix24 number. If you're looking at the Bitrix SIP connector, that's going to cost $49 per month. That's a flat fixed rate per month to use the SIP connector. And as we mentioned, with integrations, so most of the apps in the App Store, they're free of charge. You just need to make sure you meet the minimum threshold requirements to use that application. Or if you're looking at using the API to build a bespoke integration with your phone system, that could cost in the region of up to $20,000 for a build out itself. Okay, so moving on now to look at reporting. So specifically here, looking at Bitrix24 Telephony reporting. If you're using an integration, then it's most likely that your phone provider has their own reporting functionality itself. But if you're renting a Bitrix number, within the telephony module here, we have a call statistics area. Okay, and this is really nice because essentially what we can do is we can build dashboard reports to pull information from our telephony module. So let's say, for example, if I wanted to look at all of our call statistics for, let's say, for last year in 2022, I can analyze all of that information from across our team. So I can see the call distribution here amongst our team, looking at inbound, outbound calls, what calls have been missed. So I can analyze their performance throughout that period. Or, for example, I might want to see all of the unanswered calls in the system. And again, I can choose my reporting period for this as well. So again, let's say if I wanted to analyze 2022, then I can go through this inside the system and I can analyze that amongst all of the different reporting months. Almost in connection with that, it's the call density. So I can see here essentially when we are busiest from answering calls, but also missing calls through the system. So this essentially shows us where we need to be scheduling our staff through the system. So we can analyze where we need to have staff on the system to be able to answer calls. I can see we're missing quite a few calls on Wednesdays and Thursdays, so I maybe need to allocate more staff at those specific time periods. So this is a really valuable way to be able to analyze that call history. And we can analyze employee performance as well. So again, we might want to analyze across a specific time period, or maybe looking at their call durations. So there's lots of different reports that we can build out through the telephony module of Bitrix24. Okay, so in summary there, we've seen how we can set up our virtual phone system in Bitrix24 and use a lot of advanced functionality for setting up IVR menus, call recordings and working hours. We've also seen how we can use integrations through several different ways, from using a SIP connector to applications in the marketplace or using the API to build you a bespoke integration. And then we've seen the really valuable functionality, I would say, within the telephony module here. It's that integration with the CRM system. So all of that call history is saved inside the CRM. And then we've seen briefly there how we can manage and build dashboard reports to analyze our call reports inside the system. And if you're renting a Bitrix number, it is a fairly low setup cost. You know, if you're looking to get this set up fairly quickly, then the renting of a Bitrix24 number is a really valuable way to start using some of this really advanced functionality within Bitrix24. Okay, so thank you very much for joining today. If you are looking to get more information about Bitrix24, here are a selection of our up and coming webinars, which you can register for at intraface.com/webinars. If you have any questions in the meantime, you can contact us, sales@intraface.com, and one of our team will be happy to discuss your requirements in more detail and answer all of your Bitrix24 questions. Okay, thank you very much for your time today. I look forward to seeing you all in the near future. Bye.